Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to episode 3 of our Chatham-Kent Small Business Tips and Tricks videos. Today we're going to be chatting about products and services. We're going to go through how often you should analyze your products and services, how do you measure your success or failures, keeping cash flow in mind. What do you do during a crisis? How do you analyze your products and services and kind of pivot and move forward? So, Doug, do you want to start us off on products and services and maybe how often you should analyze those?
Well, when you write a business plan, you have to have your product inside of that business plan because that's usually your product or service or the engine that obviously makes revenue for you. So you should analyze that as often as possible. I mean, your business plan is something you write and review. You don't write and put in a drawer somewhere and forget about it. So, when we talk about product and our services, they're two very distinctly different things. So if we're talking product, something tangible, I make a widget, I make a thing, I import and sell something, you need to look at the margins around that. And that's important because typically you're going to sell something maybe for pure economics to make money, or you're selling something because it's a passion that you have. So you need to make sure that you are capitalizing on that the best you can, making the money that's required to keep your lights on, keep your business running. Or on the service side, that's very much the sweat equity, as we call it, or the intel behind your business, or that's the hands-on, the getting dirty of it all. That service is a little more unique because a product, it costs you $2 and you sell it for $4, where your service, you have to look at the lines on that for margins because there's a lot of detail when it comes to service. So maybe you're going to, as a plumber, so you're going in, you've got your tools, you've got your what it costs for you to show up, you've got your vehicle, you've got maybe an apprentice, the plumbing itself. All of those things are important as part of your service and or product. But keeping an eye on the bottom line is always important. I mean, no one wants to give away their business for free. We're not volunteers, we're entrepreneurs. So knowing your baseline, your product, your cost, and all the associated costs to your product and or service are extremely important, and you should review it always.
Yeah, I completely agree with Doug on that piece. It's something that should be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Once you've landed on a product or a service that you're offering that's doing very well, you should be looking at what's next for that product or service. It's not very often, I think, anymore that we can think of very many things that haven't changed going forward into the future, because as we know, nothing it's impossible to ever be perfect. So if you stop thinking about how things are going to start improving, that's when you start getting a little bit left behind, and you'll slowly start to see maybe sales start dwindling because it's a real world out there where there's a lot of rob and duplicate, and honestly, that's stuff that we tell clients to do all the time. Make it a little easier on yourself, see what's working out there already and how you can potentially do something similar or make it even better and offer a competitive advantage on something. So keeping tabs on exactly what's going on, what's your best sellers in a product aspect, and how can you continue to add value or potentially innovate those products to continue driving your business forward, right? So I think you said a lot of good things there, Doug.
It's important too. I mean, in this day and age of technology, so if you have a department store, for lack of a better description, and you have 1,000 products in your store, you'll probably know what is your bestseller because you're always reordering it. But if you don't, with technology and POS systems, you can pull a report to say this is what I'm selling the most of. This is what I'm making the most money off of, and that can help direct you towards niche marketing to sell more of that or to monopolize it, because with a lot of manufacturers, the more you buy, the lower the price, the more you can make when you sell it out the door. And that's kind of what it's all about, right?
Mm-hmm. So just kind of like all our videos, again, not we necessarily have to say it, but it's just kind of a blanket information for kind of everybody. So whether you're a department store that's holding on to inventory and that's how it works, or you're a smaller operator who really needs to know where their money makers are, because you can't necessarily hold on to a boatload of inventory and maybe it's be very wasteful to try and do it anyways. But again, just kind of speaking to everybody.
Yeah. But how there's always a disclaimer after I talk.
Well, we have to, Doug. Sorry.
Usually figure it out before you talk, but we forgot.
Yeah, usually. Yeah.
Hold on, Doug's about to talk, guys.
Yeah. I'll put something on the bottom of the screen so people know. All right. So it's important that that businesses analyze their products and services often. They need to measure their success or failures. What are some ways they can measure those success or failures of their products and services?
So a big thing is going to be just having an inventory database. If you're a service offering business, then knowing kind of what your billable hours are and where you need your margins to be. So along with business planning, maybe for the startup that hasn't actually gotten there, or maybe it's an existing owner that's just considering getting a firmer grasp on what their offerings are and trying to see if they can stretch their margins a bit or reassess things. But getting it into some form of a database, whether that's a paid for database, like a repository of some kind, or like HubSpot comes to mind for some people from a CRM perspective. But you could also likely utilize that for different purposes for inventory management stuff as well. Check that out. I'm not certain of that, but keeping everything in one place and then tracking the effectiveness of what's going on. So on a monthly basis, how many units are you selling of X? At what cost are you selling those units for? And back to how often are you analyzing your products and stuff? If you're doing these things on an ongoing basis, it's going to be very easy to, if I ask you, hey, what's the best product? What product is providing you with the best source of revenue or profit for your business, and you should be able to tell me in a second. And by implementing sort of systems like that, it's a measure, it's a way that you'll be able to do it.
Interesting. That's good information. Now, the big variable with your business is going to be your customer. So how do you figure out what your customer wants? Do they still want your product? Do they still want your service? That's going to be always a challenge when you're analyzing your products and services. That's that key component is your customer. And so what are some ways that they can measure what their customer wants?
Well, probably some of the easiest ways to measure that is something as rudimentary as asking your customers. You know, we all have database, hopefully with express consent to our clients to email them. You can use a survey. You can even a 1 or 2 question survey. And I think a lot of companies do that now, where they, after you've been in their store, they send you a 1 or 2 question survey, maybe with a discount coupon attached to it. And they ask you a couple of very pointed questions, and then you can get the feedback. So you can also look at your shelves and look at your inventory list and see what is not moving. And that's usually a very good indicator as to what is not selling.
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly what I would say too, is ask, whether it be survey, if you're a small mom and pop with a brick and mortar selling product out of your store or whatever, then honestly, you could ask after every purchase, you know, what do you think? Is there something that you'd like to see us have in the store? If you ask that question and 50 people tell you something of the same kind of variety, then you now have an opportunity to potentially diversify into a new market where maybe you hadn't realized unless you had asked. People are actually interested in kind of procuring something like that. So the worst thing you can do, regardless of what it is related to your business, is not ask questions. And the easiest thing to do that can help you out is to ask questions, whether that's for resources related to what you should sell, or resources related to, am I managing my cash flow properly, or, ask questions. Can't stress it enough.
Mm-hmm. It's a simple solution. You don't have to hire a data scientist to find the right answer. Just ask questions. Yeah, great information. So last point here. So let's say a business is going through a crisis, whether it's an internal or even, worldwide pandemic where the economy is shutting down. How do they look at their products and services and pivot so that they can still survive?
Well, that's a loaded question.
Very loaded.
And you got to answer quickly because we want to keep these very short and concise. So on you go.
I think again, it's back to the ongoing analysis of what products and services that you're actually offering. Some products and services, there isn't going to be a pivot online that's necessarily possible aside from potentially raising brand awareness for whatever that is going forward. I think the biggest thing you got to start looking at if you're in a position where you may not be able to easily pivot is thinking about how you can diversify into something relevant to what you do and start generating revenue from a different stream potentially. So again, if you're selling things that just isn't going to fly on an e-commerce world, then it's likely not going to be something that's easy to do. But at the same time, there's probably something that's in the family of what you're doing anyways that you might be able to diversify into an offering from an e-commerce side of things.
Yeah. It's important to realize too that not every product has a season too. Right now, maybe with what's going on, your product or a product that you sell is not important. Maybe you're a luxury item. Maybe you are a luxury service. So maybe having to pivot to change your approach to the services you offer or the products you provide. It's not a bad exercise to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, let's wrap it up here. Let's keep it short, concise. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, if you have any question about anything in this episode, about product and services or anything about your business, please reach out to the Chatham-Kent Small Business Centre. We would love to chat with you and talk through, brainstorm, whatever you need. We're here for you. So thanks so much for tuning in.